until 8 November, until 8 of February, and then until 8 of May. So 2 days ago, today is the 10th of May, the cycle which is the new sowing, which is a very important cycle. And these cycles are important. I will define them briefly, starting with the one we are on now, which is the new sowing. It's when those seeds of what we are supposed to cultivate. We are talking about a philosophic, spiritual content, nothing external, although also this may project itself on our inner world. So the May 8th, that moment of our human evolution starting in 1988, at which the consciousness, the whole planet, the whole universe, the best possibilities come to each one of us, a new sowing. Everything we have developed and prepared, our soil, our state of receptivity, tends to come to us starting on May 8th. On August 8th, the beginning of the expression of the evolutionary year of humanity. What does that mean? What has been sown as a seed, embraced, it found a fertile soil within us, it will awaken and will start a process. It will awaken these seeds. Then on November 8th, we have a very important cycle, which is the cycle of blossoming. After the process of development, the metabolism is very vigorous. There emerges that moment of fertilization. They are symbols. On the one hand, it's the climax of a certain expression, and when within the flower, it's fertilized and then it gives fruits. In February, we have the fructification, which is the result, the effect, the harvesting of what we have developed in the previous months. And we know that the fruit is a symbol. It only generates seeds when it matures. So we often do not see cycles in our process of evolution. We don't see the cycles expanding because we haven't matured the fruit. The fruit has been formed, the flower has been fertilized, but we do not dedicate ourselves enough so that the seed is not generated. These cycles of the hierarchy are very important indeed. In my experience, when I arrived at Figueira, the spiritual center founded by Trigueirinho in 1989, we closely saw how these cycles express themselves in our lives so that we may enter this impulse that we call the impulse of the hierarchy. And I was able to verify that it always dialogues with us. It establishes, as I mentioned, of the hierarchy, that humanity after 1988, it started to recognize the cycles of impulses, that it should manifest, purify, attract, understand, to expand its consciousness, and to come out of this point at which we find ourselves at this moment. So this cycle of the new sowing is very important. It brings an invitation for our consciousness to be receptive, to take care of the soil, to protect it, cover it, irrigate it. Irrigation here are higher, more elevated feelings, good intentions. This prepares the soil so that the seeds may polarize in our consciousness and they may generate a little more conscious evolutionary path. And the central topic of today, which we call the Irdin, where does it come from? What is the meaning of being introduced to this language? It's one of the axes of the instruction, the work of José Trigueirinho transmitted since 1987, which is the value of language, the symbolic language, the superphysical language also. So we'll try together to create the condition of understanding what language is. So what we call language is this vehicle, let's say, which connects us mutually, not only among humans, but as vibration, as language with the other kingdoms, with superphysical states and states of consciousness. And we have great difficulty with symbolic language, dreams, colors, numbers, because our mental process has become too dense and rational, deductive, which does not allow other higher levels to interact with our process of communication. Starting with the correct use of words. Think a little bit of what has happened since we woke up until now. How many times we said things that were not necessary. All this wears out the possibility of good communication. In a communication, the opportunity to transmit the essence. It's like revolving around ourselves and not being able to express what we are supposed to express. So humanity has been evolving throughout many cycles. Classical spirituality moves back until Lemuria, etc. And in Lemurian times, humanity used monosyllabic language. The constitution of the speaking system did not allow for more than that. During Atlantis, which was a time that was a little more permeated, the apex of Atlantis was the maximum development of the astral plane, everything that had to do with the emotional plane. So a language that was a little more agglutinating, the fluidity of the emotional body. And then, starting with this cycle, other possibilities such as language connected to symbols, abstract symbols. And for those who in this cycle after 1988, those who are more open, it has become a very great potential. Then language is very important as that mechanism that allows us not only to ask, to address someone or some state of consciousness, but also understand it in different degrees and in different ways. At first, every human being is seeking something, a meaning. It's almost instinctive in a human being, the quest for a meaning for our experience. So languages and in general are very important. So let's see some kinds of language that have prepared the revelation of the Irdin language, starting with the Devanagari, which was an old language through symbols that originated Sanskrit. Devanagari was widely used in ancient India and was considered the language of the Devas. The Devas are the expression of creation that participates in the creation of forms. And forms are not only flowers, trees. There are great devas that work with worlds and universes. They are consciousnesses that are extremely creative. One of the oldest languages that have been heard of. Also, Ichiwa was also a language that was in ancient times. It was used through sensorial stimuli that were not verbal before the planet had materialized as much as it materialized in Lemuria. and it engraved on the ether of the planet a language that was not physical, was matrices for the life of humanity, of the kingdoms, a state that was before the physical manifestation of the planet. Then we have the Sensat, which is a Lemurian word that started to develop, which has a direct connection with that space in the range of Roncador called the Temple of Ibis. Let's remember that the public sharings gravitate or touch topics and entries of the esoteric glossary of Trigueirinho of Editora Irdin, publishing house. So these entries gradually introduce the situation of the planet and humanity. So the Temple of Ibis is explained there also as Roncador. So the Sensat was widely used in that time of the Temple of Ibis, and the Temple of Ibis, and through it, it's a superphysical space that the hierarchy, in which the hierarchy promotes through each one of the vowels, E, B, Z, different impulses from the avatars to humanity. So for us who are seeking a real awakening, not just a betterment of the personality, but a real deep quest to know how the planet organizes itself, the position of humanity, and our role in these times, the esoteric glossary gives us a lot of information about this. In the Temple of Ibis, in the inner planes, in the range of Roncador, it creates the conditions so that we may symbolically receive the energy of these four avatars, the letter I, the letter B, the letter A, the letter Z. They are symbols, phonemes that help us connect with four matrices of the human evolution. Then the Sanskrit, mentioning very superficially, means perfection. It was widely used in old India especially. It had the possibility that was very precise to express and reveal realities of superphysical levels. So Sanskrit represented to humanity a stage of synthesis of what had come before. So what is the Irdin language? Can we learn it? Does it have a translation as the others had or have? Is it possible? What is Irdin language? We, as a mental humanity, as a mental race, we organize our languages with concepts, with descriptions, with understanding, based, connected, or mirrored on concepts. And Irdin is a synthetic form of communication that displaces us from the region of concepts to the region of states of consciousness, which is something completely different, so it does not have a translation. We'll see some examples of Irdin. It comes to us, and depending on our state of consciousness, the same word or a sentence or mantra in Irdin may bring to each one of us a different meaning, because it is a vehicle. Starting it will attract us to an expansion of consciousness. So it's not a language that confirms our concepts. You see how different it is from our mental concepts. You know the definition of a house, for example. The impulse, it's not like that. It brings us to a state of consciousness. Starting in 1988, we started remembering And I refer to remembering because we, as beings who reincarnate, souls that reincarnate, we started receiving impulses to remember our best experiences that we've had, both on the planet and in other regions of the universe. And this determines or demands that we may have a need to contact a new pattern of conduct, of behavior in higher states, archetypical expressions for the planet, for the kingdom, for humanity. So the logics of the spiritual quest, am I too fast or can you accompany? Sometimes I have to measure my rhythm with you. The logic, so to say, of the spiritual quest after 1988 is that we may really enter a different experience that's completely different from what was called up to 1988 as preparatory stages. So a preparatory stage, we work on the bodies, the alignment among the bodies. We work on the repolarization of our identity. We remember that we are not only the physical person. We start admitting that we have something more than just the person. And Irdin helps us because through this impulse, we contact through states of consciousness all these matrices without the filtering of the mind that is so much connected to prejudice and bias. So with each word, for example, Thailand, we connect to an experience that we have or a piece of information. It's not a direct experience. When Irdin touches our consciousness and places us on our best point, it puts us into contact with the archetype of what Thailand is. So it's completely different with the Irdin language. Here we'll see some examples of the Irdin language so that we may feel, to have an experience, so that it's not just one more concept, one more theory. As we gradually awaken to this need to make contact with these higher matrices, the contact with the Irdin language and higher states of consciousness, these must be accompanied by some decisions of our human consciousness. Because if we remain identified and stuck only on to our human aspect, why contact a higher aspect? This does not make sense. It's not applicable here. The reality of our personality here, it already knows how it works. It does not need or the contact with superphysical matrices and the expression of other patterns of behavior. So the Irdin language translates and brings us states of consciousness. Let's fixate this understanding. It's not a concept. I may say some words in Irdin. It doesn't have a translation. We may create some sense for some words and mantras in Irdin, but this will lead us to a true area of creation, a virgin area in which the potential of the Irdin language will mobilize within us a potential state of consciousness that we didn't even know we had. But it only makes sense to live with all this if we aspire to come out of the point where we are stuck right now. So a question remains for all of you, or all of us. Are we really satisfied with our present moment? Personal, human. Is the world well? Is humanity happy, peaceful? Is our relationship with the planet edifying? I believe that most will coincide and agree that it's the moment to take a step. So after 1988, we really have a great repository of impulses to make use of these impulses, not only to awaken, but to expand our consciousness. And for this, the Irdin language helps us a lot. As the Irdin language is not built with the logics of the languages we know, it brings us some characteristics. Some of them you can study in the Esoteric Glossary, because at the beginning of each letter, we have many letters that somehow are connected with Irdin. For example, the H letter, which is very important in Irdin, it means the interaction with a higher impulse that gains stability. This impulse gains stability. It sustains itself when there is this horizontal line, which is this relationship with humanity, the planet, and the other kingdoms, this environment which we interact with. And this connection, this horizontal segment line, represents the point of balance and service. And Irdin, it enters in the position of a word in Irdin, depending on the strength, the spiritual strength that this word has in Irdin. So imagine, instead of dedicating ourselves to everything we do that at first has no real importance for our evolution, if we could pick each vowel, each consonant, each letter, and observe its effect in us at a given moment, at a certain moment in the future, we'll make a sharing about the sound and what it creates in the ethers and in us. So we pronounce a vowel, for example, I, what it promotes within us. So imagine how many hundreds of times every day in our dialogues we pronounce the word I, the letter I. We don't even realize what it creates in us, what it mobilizes within us. So we simplify too much a great reality. And a key that after 1988 was greatly highlighted in evolutionary path was coming out of the selfishness that we used to have, having ourselves as the center, to the process of being mirrors of inner realities. So this completely changes the paradigm of the use of the energy and the use of our life, so to say. We live to serve. Connected somehow to the topic of the Temple of Ibis with a range of Roncador, we studied at the beginning of the year one of the entries, some positions of the hierarchy on the planet. One of them, as we saw, the consciousness of the Manu. Manu is a hierarchical spiritual level that accompanies the evolution of the races. The Manu has its polarization of consciousness in the Temple of Ibis. So the evolutionary process of the race is monitored, and each action of ours, as unbelievable as it may seem, it becomes a database that tells how the human consciousness is. So many of us sometimes think, I am tired, I make an effort, but the world seems to be worse. Apparently, yes, but there in Ibis, in the consciousness of Manu, our effort, our right evolutionary movement becomes registered and enters a process of accompaniment of the race as a whole. It becomes a sample for that to become a foundation, and it's recognized as a fruit. There is a hierarchical level, a word in Irdin called Manushirin, which is a group of monads. A part are monads of the hierarchy, and a part of them are human monads that monitor a space of the human consciousness, so that something that has been successful in human consciousness may be applied to other humans. So if we listen to this sound, Manushirin, and within us there emerges a feeling of gratitude. Wow, this exists. I didn't even know. It's a state of consciousness that accompanies each evolutionary gesture of mine. Shouldn't we feel grateful for this? At some place of this Akashic record, this is registered, recorded, and will impact our evolutionary process. So Manushirin, this word in Irdin, they carry out a part of the task of the Manu, who is making a synthesis of our race and preparing the new race, which will be intuitive race connected to other kinds of evolution. And to the extent that we human beings on different degrees are seeking the real evolutionary process and taking steps, this becomes patterns of behavior that are manifested within the human consciousness as a whole. This should bring us a lot of gratitude and peace. So I'm not alone. Whatever I do internally is shared and is a benefit for the human evolution, because we are addicted to results, expectations, impact. We are continuously stimulated to personal. So, in this context, to know Manushirin can help us generate within us a feeling of love and gratitude. Well, in the Esoteric Glossary, we will find some mantras in Irdin. Mantras are sounds. The Sanskrit has many mantras, as we know. Many mantras that, again, mobilize states of consciousness within us. And the mantric work is directly connected to the creative process, therefore connected to repetition also. A rhythm creates, mobilizes different states of consciousness, promotes a synthesis, and at a certain point, a code enters our consciousness and eventually manifests and sustains a transformation of a behavior. So let's see some examples before we move on to the questions. For example, a mantra that all of us need, which is a mantra of opening, of receptivity and availability for purification. This is a public mantra and is published in the Esoteric Glossary. Therefore, we can study here. This mantra says, availability for the purification. It's a mantra in Irdin. Okuka banaiti, shibana kikinawa. Our minds, when they receive an impulse like this, it will not find a reference that is mental or a literal translation, because it's not a mental language like ours. So we work on this mantra once, twice. We observe ourselves a third time. We observe ourselves again. We remember an impulse that accompanies it so that we may somehow have some reference as availability for purification. So we create this condition, and this mantra will carry out a work on us. And one of the works that it carries out on us is a transformation of our human bodies. So if we want to enter a higher evolution, we need to remember that the process is not controlled or led by us. We need to assimilate this principle after 1988. Until 1988, there was a asceticism, privations, many practices that forced the human nature but created a certain condition so that an individual would reject their human nature. But this is completely dated. Humanity now is on a different level and has a different kind of openness. So this mantra, Okukana Banaiti Shibana Kikinawa, helps the harmonization of our being and availability for purification. Therefore, something in us which is very much proud or attached may say, but I do not need to be purified. I'm so well. There is an issue in the spiritual evolution which is called the guardian of the threshold. The guardian of the threshold are all the gaps and all the previous experiences extremely connected with the personality, that when we want to take a step to cross the threshold, this emerges, stands before us full of expectations. Have you found this guardian of the threshold? Reasonings, always giving us reasons not to take a step. Eventually, to bypass this situation that dazzles our consciousness, this mantra may help because it creates the condition of availability for purification. It's a mantra in Irdin, Okuka Banaiti Shibana Kikinawa. It gradually harmonizes the being with an availability for purification. Then the universe takes charge of organizing what must be purified, to what degree, what intensity, what's the next step. Everything is ready. There is something ready on the higher planes ready for us. But the point is, we do not want to release the process. As long as we do not release and allow the universe to work on us, to practice Irdin has no effects, because it does not mobilize what is higher in us and is not in the personality at first. Therefore, this sound in Irdin Okuka has no translation, but it introduces in the human consciousness and the permanent atom of each human material body. What is a material body? This physical body, the emotional body, the mental body. This vibration, Okuka, this sound, this state of consciousness introduces the energy of the vibration of harmony. This harmony enters each atom of our being and gradually promotes the liberation of this potential that is within the cells and among the cells. The materialization of humanity has generated a compression in our inner potential, as if our inner world, our inner light were encapsulated within our molecule. So this luminescent code of the sound Okuka, for those who want to have a more contemplative, reflective experience, work on the sound Okuka, Okuka. This luminescent code, especially in the etheric body. The etheric body is the body that accompanies our physical body, permeates our physical body, and bridges with our emotional body. So while this process starts to consolidate this luminescent vibration of harmony, this code starts entering even our physical bodies. It generates a process that's called in Irdin retram. Retram, which is also a word in Irdin, is an opening of inner channels of healing, so that this cosmic energy that is non-material may generate harmony and balance in our bodies. So it's a mantra. You see one word in Irdin, Okuka. See the deep work that it carries out. It's not a therapeutic process. It's the healing of our consciousness. It's the preparation of our situation, our human framework, so that we may perceive the blossoming of what dwells within us. Well, all of us, as reincarnating beings, we have many records that are from the past. Luminescent records that accompanied the evolutionary impulses. They are treasures that are somehow stored in our soul, but we also have many traumas. We have many wounds and scars. So this luminescent code, this vibration of harmony, Okuka, has also the possibility to help us transmute, facilitate this wound, this trauma, to be displaced from this spot of suffering and becomes dissolved into a region of learning. It ceases to be a scar, a fragile place, spot, to become a recyclable material that will become a part of our synthesis. Isn't it important, this word in Irdin? Who does not need it? And precisely because it is a sound, a vibration, a state of consciousness that brings this pattern of harmony, it generates, as a consequence, not in a magical way, a protection. Protection from what? A protection from interferences, from what would prevent us from having a communion with our inner life. It's not a protection from someone or something. It's the preservation of the best codes that we have so that they are not interfered with. One word, Okuka. Just imagine the whole mantra, Okuka Banaiti Shibana Kikinawa. Now, naturally, it's not a process of work for us to do with some expectation or directing this to heal a physical ailment. We are dealing with the consciousness and the inner process. It may be true that the muscle, the bone, they may be harmonized also. Let's understand that Irdin language polarizes itself in states of consciousness to facilitate our awakening and the elevation of our consciousness. And as the last impulse of this mantra, Okuka Banaiti, is that it radiates through the energy of light that it brings, an energy that helps dissolve the mental and emotional incomprehension. So it may help us during a situation that we cannot understand, or we see our emotional body unstable. Let's be more intelligent, leave it alone, and have a better condition to contact a luminescent code that will carry out its work and will dissolve this incomprehension and this situation, emotional situation. So let's return to this content in future sharings, because it's really a very important work, this approximation of the Irdin language and what it promotes within us. A movement that has nothing to do with memory, mental processes, etc. It's as if we were in a dark room. We suddenly see the sun rising. It's the inner experience. We see ourselves in a state of consciousness that's completely virgin. It's not magical, but it's a language used by higher consciousnesses that starting in 1988, it approached the human consciousness of humanity. We may call it one more tool to come out of these logics of the rational process and gradually build this condition for a deep and consistent human transformation. Next week will be in São Carlos. The public lecture will be in São Carlos. And on Sunday, on the 18th, we'll carry out a practice of mantras. So those who are in São Carlos who want to practice Sunday, at dawn, we'll have a practice of mantras. Those who want to participate may have this experience. The same thing on the 24th in São Paulo. At some moment, we can do it online with everyone to have some kind of direct experience with all this. So to close, remember that Okuka is this impulse that introduces a luminescent and harmonious energy. And when it activates and touches our cell, our atom, it generates this opening of inner healing that we call Ritram in Irdin also. And everything that this word Okuka represents, we can have as initial contact here. Is there any question on the chat? Who will read the chat? Some questions have arrived. Let's follow their order. Vanderleia Carvalho de Souza asks, the Roncador, would it be a portal to other dimensions? When we talk about Roncador, we are talking about the range of the Roncador, but we are referring to the superphysical space that is in the region. It's not the physical space. What is polarized in those ranges? Let's remember that when we started the study in January of the Esoteric Glossary, the first entry topic that we started was the states of consciousness. So Vanderleia, you can look at the glossary. You see that there are many dimensions, and at this moment in this interaction among us, there is an etheric, emotional, mental, and superphysical interaction. Our inner world, that is everything that is above and within, above the mental plane and within our deep consciousness, are super physical reality. So yes, I refer to the superphysical space that is in the range. Márcia Adriana de Oliveira Fryer, the incorrect pronunciation of Irdin could influence on the work that the word would carry out. Naturally, the stress syllables in the words creates a value from the melodic movement of sounds. Okuka no es okuka, nor okuka, it's okuka. This potentializes to the maximum the occult significance of the mantra, but someone does not know or intuits or contacts a word in Irdin and does not stress the correct syllables, all the code behind the word will manifest itself, perhaps not to the utmost possibility, but Silmara da Costa, Fray Luciano, when we mantralize the words in Irdin, does it make any difference to understand the meaning of the words, or the mere intention of doing it with love is enough, is sufficient? For example, Okuka Banaiti, which is availability for purification, it's like a sign saying this way, availability for purification, but it's not a concept, it's a direction. It's a general line, what is behind Okuka Banaiti. So no, if we practice it with love, but behind the question, I think it's important to identify the topic of the rays. We have talked about rays. We have to study it again in the future. But depending on our ray and our nature, it'll be the way we will practice it. So those who have the second ray, the ray of love wisdom, may have an immature tendency that may think that understanding is not important, that love is enough. This is the path of the least resistance, no problem. Someone who has the fifth ray, the scientific ray, for this individual, it may be important to understand. So each one has their own nature. One more question. Friar, this mantra that was mentioned here, Ukuka, does it work specifically, something specific in the bodies or the consciousness of the individual? It works our availability for purification. It is as if this mantra in Irdin creates a condition for this luminescent energy to enter and may carry out a field of harmony and light within us and a possibility of liberation. It's not directed to a specific thing. The next question, Pinheiro. One tip not to stop at this moment. Any reflection about this awakening? How can we impel this releasing? This release, depending on your nature, it helps us to understand that in the universe, nothing is stuck. We should not be bound to anything, but something important so that we may not create any guilt feelings or remorse, because all of us have attachments to things or people, because eventually something has not concluded its cycle. So we have to have a lot of humility to know at what moment of the experience with something or a place or someone has concluded or not. Because releasing in advance before the right moment is an interference also. This is not static. This is a living process. The point is, you're asking yourself, do I feel I am stuck in something? To make some offerings within yourself. We'll reach a work with dreams, as we've seen before. Trigueirinho always guided us, and he used to say, before we go to bed, let's dialogue with ourselves. What do I have to release? Something that I cannot see that I have to release isn't something too much, but not trying to guide or control or manipulate. It's just an opening oneself, an effort for oneself. This helps a lot in this process to find even strength to release. But we can only release either when we become tired of something or when we make a decision, which is not the energy of the majority. Most people have difficulty making decisions. We accommodate situations, but we need the energy of will to break. It's not a destructive rupture, maybe a new state of that situation. Another question in Spanish. Andrea Gutierrez Garcia, greetings. The practice of mantras, does it foster silence? The practice of mantras, does it foster silence? We have planned for a study about silence. Because silence, after 1988, for the hierarchy, is an emptying of the inner world. It's not just an external condition. In the inner emptying, we silence our intentions, greeds, desires, and this self-emptying, we gradually create a condition so that our true identity may show, may manifest. But mantras help us in silence. But as it has nothing to do with the minds are very deeply connected with interests. It is manipulative. It creates a condition to make things revolve around our interests, but these interests often do not coincide with our inner world. So this availability for purification, this silence will naturally emerge, but it will not be an exercise. It'll be the pressure, the positive pressure of this luminescent code that will gradually calm what is not ours any longer. It's completely different from an external practice. Another question, a request. Fray Luciano, can you repeat the mantra slowly? Okuka, okuka, bana iti, shibana kiki nawa. This mantra is in the Esoteric Glossary. One more question. Ahora, André Geraldo Mejia, the little book of mantras of Figueira, are they of public use or reserved? Some for the public that does not know Figueira. It was generated at the beginning of the founding of Figueira. It's a booklet of mantras as a part of mantras that we have available. Some of them are public and are in esoteric public, and some of those mantras that are not public are not in the esoteric glossary and are not public. Elani Kasam, what would be a good path to work for the transformation of our control? This is a path. There is not a formula. This path is the path of the virtue or quality that we call humility. And humility is not that external situation that we may appear to be humble. It's our acceptance of things as they are, as we are, and from that point on will evolve. So in this simplicity of the attitude of being before this present moment and not becoming absent from this moment, will gradually dissolve the artificial personal power. The personal control is the childish presupposition that we can control. We do not control even our bowels movement, so we have to change our consciousness. We have to admit that to live our evolutionary process and to allow life to live within us, we have to live the work within ourselves. The point is, we have, as human beings, the tendency to associate everything that happens or will happen spiritually with losing things or losing the possession of something or someone. We have to be healed from this sense of possession so that when we are touched by higher energies, this process of detachment, of fluidity, of surrender, of collaborating but not controlling, we have to admit that we cannot control anything. One more question, please. Question, Cristiano Cavalcante. What mantras could help us to move more and physically be in the correct way, supporting the manifestation of the tasks that are needed for the sustenance of the communities? Well, there is a mantra in Irdin that is in this booklet of mantras of Figueira that works directly with this topic of the manifestation of the evolutionary plane. So this mantra is a little bit out of the public context so that everyone can accompany. Let's remember that mantras are not a magical process. I say a mantra and I have a result. Now the mantras brings us an impulse for the awakening of the consciousness to create a more harmonious environment more porous, so to say, to interact with other higher states of consciousness. And a conscious consequence of this may be the mobilization of our inner potential, therefore, a clarity on how to better collaborate with the manifestation of the evolutionary plane. There is one more question. Jamil, Friar, can the mantra dissolve? To respond synthetically, I would have to open a comment. What we call involution are particles, parts of God, of one life, that are at their evolutionary moment. They are disconnected from the source. Therefore, the self-consciousness of evolution, they think they have a life of their own, they have an objective of their own. This is what we call involution. Therefore, as we work with Okuka Banaiti, which enters our consciousness in this molecule of healing, this indirectly illuminates these spaces and gradually redeems and heals depending on the degree of negativity. What we call evil also is not that precarious, superficial, and full of prejudice thing. Evil is what is disconnected from a greater good, from the totality. Within the one consciousness, it's something just like any other. The, but it's blind, it has no light, it's under a different experience. It gradually dissolves that, and through the presence of light, it shows to this evolution, not in a confrontative, in a conflictive way, but in a harmonious way. So come, welcome, come here, be redeemed. It's not a forced process. So Irdin places us in contact with universal love, a different luminescent logics. It's not the logics of convincing someone, of reasoning. It's the logics of the presence of light, which sooner or later will absorb what we call the involution. Does anyone have within the whole any question about this context? Well, very well. So good night, everyone. Sleep with Okuka. And tomorrow, wake up with Okuka and tell me later. Until next Saturday, good night. Thank you very much.